everybody. Thank you again. This is a great turnout. First breakout session, post-general session. You are here, hopefully in the right place, for tooling up for incident response. We're going to tackle people, process, tools/technology, and I'll be your host, Chris Mirswa. I'm a senior director here at Commvault, responsible for our global resilience programs. And of course, I'm a little biased because it's our panel here, but this is an unprecedented 6-hour no restroom break. I got to tell you, we said, should we not? Maybe it's against the rules, but we'll try it. No, I'm just kidding. 1 hour on your calendars, but it's one of the few, so thank you. I know it's a big commitment to be here for the 60 minutes, but I promise it's going to be worth it. We've assembled 3 incredible people, and I'm going to do a little intro for each of them because I can do it less humbly than they can, but I want to make sure for the next hour you know the level of talent that's here. And I hope you feel the same as us. We're trying to tackle and interweave sort of 3 unique areas that at least I can think of that maybe haven't been tackled when it comes to how should we think about and be ready for incident response in new and unique ways. And so that's what we're hoping to tackle. So without further ado, let me start first to my left. Dr. Jessica Barker. I've gotten a little chance to know you over the last couple of months. This is unique. She comes to us both with a deep cybersecurity background and looks at it from a human angle. So while I hope we all have unique things, I can tell you probably never heard what she's done before, but a little more intro. 2 books, global circuit discussions. She's on the plane all the time, all around the world, talking to people, talking to companies like yours about how to prepare people for the things that you're not usually talking about. How do they actually handle these things, right? And we're going to go deep and dive into that. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, one more over. Let's get to Ricky Mayer. Ricky, while you just joined Commvault, welcome aboard, right?
Thank
a few
you.
months. Comes with a 25-year-plus background in IT as a senior executive, and he is now our Vice President of Global and Professional Services for Commvault. But long career at IBM, Kyndryl, VMware, and you know, when you have people doing professional services, you're not tested when things go well. You're tested when there's challenges. And clearly you've been through a lot of those, and he's going to bring a lot of that magic to us today. So thank you for being here.
Honor.
All right, the big guy. By the way, originally from the UK, hail now from US, Dallas, Fort Worth, right? Zach came all the way from a little town called Cape Town, right? Small flight. So,
Little village.
yeah, little village. Zach and I get to work together a fair amount. We're very lucky to have him. His background, deep, technical, in the trenches, an absolute technical talent. I've had the privilege over my career to work with a lot of people who have immense technical acuity, and not trying to puff this up, but Zach clearly is at the top of his game, and he's going to bring today to us, you know, a real in the trenches view and how to tackle that from a tools perspective. So I hope I did that justice. You're going to hear the magic here today. So that said, I want to start with you, Jessica. So when we were prepping, you whipped out a term that we all need some education on, and that's this optimism bias. So if you could clinic us on that, that'll give us a great kind of launch pad for the session.
Sure. So one thing I find really helpful in cybersecurity, because I'm always looking at the people side, I think we can learn so much from neuroscience, from psychology, from sociology, from these fields that understand human behavior and ways of thinking, what makes us tick and what makes us do the things we do. And one concept and long piece of research from neuroscience is around this idea of the optimism bias. Research showing that 80% of people around the world, we are wired towards optimism. That is regardless of where we're from, it's regardless of gender, of age, of ethnicity, of socioeconomic background. And we may look at the world, the wide world, and think things are getting worse. But from an individual, a family, a team perspective, we have this optimism bias. Essentially thinking the bad thing won't happen to us. And the research, there's been so much research done on this, a lot led out of London by Dr. Tali Sharot, so if you want to go and have a look at it, highly recommend. And this research is generally looking at things like, health, things like divorce, the fact that people don't think the bad thing will happen to them. And I think this has such applicability to cybersecurity. When I first started to learn about it, I thought this is why when we go to a board with all the statistics of the fact that an incident is likely to happen at some point, why they maybe shrug it off. Because they think, well, that happens to everybody else, but that's not going to happen to us. And I think this has such an impact in all sorts of elements of cybersecurity, not least incident response.
And I'm guessing that that bias really exacerbates itself when bad things do happen.
Yeah.
Because they're like, this goes against everything I could have thought.
Yeah, that's it. It undermines that kind of muscle memory, that resilience, that individual and team and even organizational resilience, because we're thinking, well, we didn't think that this would happen. So there's a level of shock and, tools, processes, and the human element of incident response just aren't in place because it was never expected.
I see. And just curious, one thing, so we probably all know people in our lives who are glass half full, glass half empty. To use your statistic, 80% of people are, with respect to this, are glass half full.
Yes.
80% full,
Yeah.
to use the analogy. But you meet people and there are people that are less than half full, but you're saying internally, when they think about it, that's where they're still at this 80.
And also that difference between a cynicism maybe around the world and thinking about how things are going to pan out for you. And internally, your expectations.
Right.
And optimism is a good thing. I'm not saying we should try and design out optimism. I'm an optimistic person myself, and I do often recognize optimism bias at play with myself. Optimism is great. We wouldn't have got to where we are as human beings if we weren't optimistic. And also, we'd struggle to get through the day, quite frankly, if we didn't have some optimism. So instead of trying to design it out, one thing is to recognize it, and another thing is to work with it when we can.
I see.
So rather than, this saying of like, oh, it's not if but when, and trying to scare people, we can say, you know what, an incident's likely to happen, but we can be prepared. There's things we can do to have tools in place, to have processes in place, and the more we prepare, the more resilient we will be. So taking an optimistic framing of something that is challenging.
Interesting. And how, in punching through for the folks who are in that 20% category, how difficult is that then? Or how more or less are they prepared because they're biased the other way?
It can, the being biased against optimism can then be challenging in itself, because you can think, well, the bad thing's always going to happen, so why should I bother? So that kind of messaging around being prepared, funnily enough, it kind of works for both sides, helpfully enough.
Yeah. So, Ricky, I'm sure large projects, when they go wrong, right? Where have you seen this play out?
Yeah. So look, during crisis, we often don't rise to the level of our IR plans or any plans. We often fall to the levels of our execution practice, right? Rehearsed behaviors often beats great intentions. And incident response, or as I call it, incident resiliency, is just that. It's a goal, but without practice and rehearsed behaviors and that mental model and that mental muscle memory, you're going to fail. And if your first disaster is where you have your first practice, the outcomes is not going to be resiliency, it'll be bad press. Right? So to pack on to Jessica's point about optimism bias, we often tend to forget that we as humans have to then look at the processes and then the tools at our disposal, bring them all together in this highly complex world that we are in today. And we heard from our keynote speakers this morning that the technology, the landscape, everything around is becoming more and more complex.
Yeah.
And in that diverse, complex environment, having one, an optimism bias, and two, this false notion of security that we have plans, but we haven't really rehearsed them or practiced them, is just setting us up for more failures than success.
And that reminds me of some, so I'm sure if we did a raise of hands or we went and chatted with y'all, a lot of folks are like, hey, look, I could be as optimistic as I want, and I want to be ready, but we don't have the budget, we don't have the time, we don't have the people. So I'm going to guess when those forces push against the optimism bias, that's also a force to be reckoned with, right? Like, I want to do this, but the institution that I work for can't afford it, can't get it done. So I maybe we could explore that a little as we go on as well, because you probably see that, Zach, right? I mean, when rough things happen, I mean, what happens with these folks? How do they react in the middle of the situation, in the pressure cooker, if you will?
Yeah, Chris, you've got to understand everyone's still a human. It doesn't matter how many times you've practiced something. Although the exercise and the practicing does help a lot. That's essentially how you get your resilience. But people go hide when incidents happen. They go hide, they try and clean their tracks and see if it wasn't any of their mistakes, and then start blaming and so on and so forth. And that basically comes from the initial standpoint where it wasn't tested enough. A cyber resilience or cyber recovery plan, you've got the plan, but it wasn't tested enough. And as soon as you drill that in, so it becomes a muscle memory, and everyone knows precisely what they're going to do next on cue, then you don't have that kind of behavior anymore. Which is also interesting, because I heard your statistics, and I wish I brought some of my own. But how does insurance then work into that? Because like you said, we don't want to pay for insurance, right? We hate that kind of expense. But how does that work into the optimism bias? Because in the end, we still pay for car insurance, health insurance.
Interesting point on that. If we think about health insurance, or if we think about life insurance, how are they framed? It's not framed as illness insurance or death insurance.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So again, we can learn something from those industries, and the fact that that's not happened by accident.
Right.
There is framing at work there to help appeal to people.
Sure.
Rather than
taking care of your family,
exactly,
paying it forward, right?
Yes, you can think about the adverts that you see, you can think about the framing around all of that. It's all a very optimistic and positive framing of things that essentially are negative.
Yeah. I just want to take a quick pause and tell you that the AC turned up here because we were losing pounds so fast up here. I can speak for myself. It was incredible. What a miracle just occurred. Okay. Could you imagine State Farm? Get yourself some death insurance. Like a good neighbor. God, it just rolls off the tongue.
We call it green resilience or something like that.
But in cybersecurity, we often frame stuff the other way.
That's true. Yeah.
We're
not taking the lead from a well-established.
Yeah, and this is my secret. A lot of the things that I bring to cybersecurity, I'm not inventing or reinventing the wheel.
Right.
I'm taking known knowledge, research that's out there that anybody can draw upon, just in fields that are outside of cybersecurity, and bringing it in here. And there's so much we could advance if we look more at those fields. And I think we will, but of neuroscience, psychology, sociology, marketing, so much we can learn.
So to that end, not asking you to give away the farm, because I know you get a pretty penny, but if there are a couple of takeaways, if you were to cliff notes when you do an engagement, what are a couple things that could be, top of mind that you want your folks to take away when you do one of these?
Yeah, it varies, but in terms of this particular conversation, I think one thing is, in cybersecurity, we often rely on the fear, don't we, to try and spread our messaging. And I understand that people think we can scare someone into behavior. Yeah. It doesn't really work like that, or using fear to try and change behavior is very complicated. And we use it as a kind of a hammer.
Okay.
What we can think about instead is how we can frame our messaging. So we can think about working with human bias, because the bias is there. So how can we frame our messaging? For example, if we want a board or a team to practice incident response, then rather than trying to scare them into thinking that's important, we can be, realistic presentation of the threat. But if we practice, that makes us more resilient. That resilience comes from repetition. So thinking of that more optimistic framing.
Okay, and we talked a little bit about this, I remember when we were in Las Vegas. You do something so unique, and if someone's saying, wow, I've got to get Jessica or someone, how do you sell this internally? This is such a unique concept. It's not part of, probably everybody's sitting here going, wow, I had no idea somebody did this, right? Or when you see successful ways to sell your services, and get punched through to the exec team, or what are a few routes to make that happen?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for 15 years.
Yeah.
And in the early days, I certainly wrestled a lot more with that. I think one thing is that we've seen this growing recognition in the cybersecurity industry that people are at the heart of cybersecurity just as much as tools or processes. But essentially, it often takes a level of cultural maturity in an organization. And unfortunately, it often takes that experience of an incident, either directly or an organization seeing one of their peer organizations, because that breaks through the optimism bias.
Yeah, and I guess you could look at it double-edged sword. It's both unfortunate that that's what it takes, but it's also if that has to be the catalyst, and it's not you and maybe a peer, and go forward. All right, that's fantastic. Thank you. On purpose, I did not ask Jessica, hey, give me a full rundown on that, because it's fascinating. I think for all of us coming from a technical area, it's so new to us. So yeah, absolutely. All right, so Ricky, when you and I spoke, you were talking about minimum viable. Interesting, we heard a lot in the keynote this morning, but we didn't eliminate that term on purpose, but it's kind of buried under sort of the next level. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So to the point of, practice makes perfect, right? But how do you practice, and what do you practice on?
Yeah.
So, if you look at a large ecosystem, you have such a huge disparate system of technologies at your display that's running your business. How do you know where to start practicing, and how often do you practice, right? So, at Commvault, we talked about the notion of minimal viable, and what that really is that leveraging tools like a BIA assessment that we've been doing for many, many years, you start to define what's mission critical for your business. So Active Directory could be mission critical, a patient care system could be mission critical, and you define and say, that's what I'm going to start with first, because if there is a compromise and I'm shut down, this is what I want to bring up first. And then going to my, from mission critical to business critical system, that could be your emails, your comms, your other applications and workloads. And then you define the supporting applications that once they're up, together with mission critical, business critical, and supporting apps, now you have your entire environment operational. Because remember, we often talk about incident response and we think security. Incident response is required as a process or as a institutional knowledge, not just for security incidents. You could have a bad software police that could take you down. You could have an agentic AI software that may do something, may call and shut down your environment. So to me, incident response is beyond just security. It really helps you define your enterprise operational capability, right? And this is why the notion of mission critical or minimal viable comes in, to help you really define your applications and your workloads, and then start to build testing and procedures around it. The other thing I want to sort of highlight on quickly is that if you look at the NIST framework for incident response, the special publication 861, it often breaks down incident response into 4 elegant phases. So prepare, detect, and then it gets into containment, eradicate, recovery, and the last is reassess, redo your baseline. Well, the problem with this whole notion of recover, as we heard earlier today, is that it creates blind spots. Because what are you really recovering? How well do you trust what you're recovering? Is that data fully trustworthy, right? Does it have the integrity checks in it? And I think this is why I think NIST needs to reassess what they're saying as recover and maybe think rebuild. Because, recover to me essentially seems like you have a wall that's damaged and you're patching the wall. Well, it's not that elegant, right? You're patching the wall. Rebuild is essentially rebuilding that wall from a known blueprint. And this is why, you look at our solutions like Cloud Rewind and others, we actually help you rebuild the entire application stack, right? With known data, with good data, and now you have a level of trust in your recovery through the rebuild process. So, I'll end up, this by saying, don't just think about incident response as one security only.
Right.
It's anything that can take your business offline. You cannot bring back everything on the first minute, right?
Yeah.
The goal of incident response is to basically detect in seconds, mitigate in minutes, and stay resilient forever. And for that, you need to have definition of what's minimal viable for your company.
So in that, I almost want to do a raise of hands here. Let's take the Wayback Machine, just pick 10 years. And we were walking around and telling everybody, hey, we've got this incredible service, not us, Commvault, but the industry. We're going to do application mapping. Because before you can even move up stack to a larger discussion of that, you have to first understand the level of interconnectivity. And I'm going to say, I'm a glass half full guy, just making sure Jessica knows. But we tried so hard as an industry for that, and we failed with so many enterprises. If you ask, in fact, I won't even ask because people are going to want to raise their hands. Hey, do you have a full application map? I would bet we do not get a lot of hands. And so that's okay maybe because now we've raised it up that we can recover at a different layer of abstraction. But I'm just curious of your take on that because you probably went through that, right, in that first round. So does this help? You still have to define minimal viable, but does it help that you've abstracted out that more detailed application mapping?
Not just application mapping, even data mapping. Because your applications are essentially consumers of your data. Right?
Yeah.
End of the day, a ransomware, malware, or any adversary that's trying to compromise you is not compromising you because he loves your application.
Yeah.
He's really after his crown jewels, which is the data, right?
Right.
So know where your data resides, and our attack surfaces are just getting out of control. And you asked if we ever knew where our applications and mapping resided. Maybe in the 70s and the 80s when you had client-server applications.
Right.
Or dumb terminals connecting to a mainframe. Today you are building monolithic, you're going from building monolithic to cloud-native applications on the fly.
Yeah.
You're launching VMs.
Yep.
You have the whole DevSecOps process that's launching applications on the go, and data resides everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think this is why having that end-to-end visibility, who has the data, who's accessing it, where does the controls lie? And those basics of eating your security vegetables hasn't gone away. You still have to make sure that you're eating your security vegetables from the access control, from identity management, making sure that you have zero trust. All those lateral movements between your data points are secure, because your incident response capability, or as I call it, incident resiliency, which is made up of response, recover, and rebuild to get you incident resiliency relies on how well you know your environment.
Okay. So, Zach, I have to ask you a question. Everybody's overloaded, right? Everybody you work with, and when you come in, you're supplementing with your incredible skill sets they don't have. Do folks not have time to do this? I mean, these are important things Ricky's pointing out, but when you actually hit the ground level, why can't we get some of this done? What's holding folks up from defining this?
Well, because there's actually a bunch of things. I'd actually say, firstly, culture.
Okay.
You've got these departments that especially when you've got like older companies, and I want to point out to the application mapping. If your application is 2 months old, you precisely know what it's about. Once you get to 2 years and it's as like feelers all over the place, then you have no idea what's going on. Yeah, and just like that, with the older company, you get these cultures: security guy, backup guy, endpoint guy, and they don't mix. Yeah. You mix with your own guys, right?
Right.
I told someone yesterday that 30-year IT experience, and 17 of those were dedicated to security. In not one day of that 17 years I've ever met my backup guys, which is insane because in the end, if you think about it, what am I doing as a security guy? I'm not securing the people or their cars.
Yeah.
I'm also securing the data, just like the backup guys. So I think in cultures, companies and cultures, we need to change the way we think of each other's roles and what we are actually doing there. I'm there to put a firewall, IPS, SIM, SOC, all those nice things, and do the forensics, the pen testing, and architecture. But the reason for that all boils down to what everyone is doing there, and it's building that data, building the applications, and serving a service to or outward to the common folk, right?
Mm-hmm. So, Jessica, I could feel you on the edge of your seat. So how do you bust through that? I mean, again, this has to be sold at a very different level to change that cultural piece.
Yeah,
right?
I love that Zark brought up culture.
Yeah.
And to Ricky's point as well about when an incident happens or preparing for an incident is about so much more than security. And yeah, of course, we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about backups, but we're also thinking about the whole organization. We're thinking about the culture, and we're thinking about how everybody can be impacted. So as Ricky was talking, I was thinking about what's been happening in the UK this year. So I'm from the UK, I'm now based in Las Vegas, but I've spent a lot of time back in the UK this year, and one of my favorite places to go is Marks and Spencer's. And Marks and Spencer's had a very big, as everybody knows, very big, very long incident this year. And I was there on day one. I was trying to buy some groceries and my card wouldn't work, and I'm thinking, oh no, what's going on here? And it turned out it was day one of a cyber attack that took their website down. I've lost track of for how long, but we're talking about months.
Supply chain, nothing on the shelves,
yeah,
right?
I was going into Marks and Spencer's and the shelves were empty, or there would be one product covering like a whole shelf. So there would be like 100 bottles of Coca-Cola rather than the usual variety. So I'm chatting to everybody in there on the shop floor. I'm going into the cafe and I'm chatting to the people working there, not telling them I work in cybersecurity, but I'm just like, oh, you've got no avocados. Is this something to do with the cyber incident? And I found it so interesting how they responded. Firstly, and this happened with everybody I spoke to, firstly, they acknowledged how challenging it was for them. And they said, we're coming in every day. We don't know what we're coming into. We don't know if we're coming into no stock to give customers or to provide to customers, or if we're coming into it being like the week before Christmas and we are overloaded with stock. We're having customers ask if we've got XYZ and we can't check on the systems. We don't know. So they would acknowledge how bad it was. And then they would say, but we're so lucky because we all work so well as a team. We're all supporting each other. We're hearing from head office all the time. And I heard on multiple separate occasions how much respect they had for the security team. They were saying things like, the tech team is working so hard to get things right, and they're working around the clock. I hear they're sleeping in the office, they're getting the pizza delivered. And this, by the way, this was nowhere near the head office. This is up in the northeast of England compared to London. And I thought there's so much we can learn from that. And I kept reflecting on why. And I thought, well, why do I love going to Marks and Spencer's? It's like, it's got a brand of trust, and it's got a personality. And I can only take from this that is internal as well as projected externally. So the communications is something we can learn from. The respect that was coming from the top of the organization all the way through is then mirrored back. And this isn't built in an incident. This is built in a company culture over years when things are good, and then it's tested when things go wrong.
That's interesting.
And another factor that makes this whole thing very complicated is, today we are living in the world of shared responsibility, right? So today enterprises are not just struggling with the silos that they have internal to their IT, legal, support, application, databases team, but you're also now running an environment where your workloads are constantly being run over Then you also have SIs who are helping you do custom integration and stuff like that. So where does the responsibility really start? Because you have to now look at the shared responsibility model that we have put ourselves in intentionally, where we have security of the infrastructure, security of the cloud, security of the application, security of the on-prem. And in the shared responsibility matrix, even though everybody understands the need for building the hygiene, the culture, it's the competing priorities that prevents people from truly building these IR plans and testing it out. And I think companies who are going to win this battle are the ones who are intentional about breaking the shared model from a resiliency standpoint to say, you know what, it's important for all of our partners to work together with us and build these plans and then execute on them. Because at the time of crisis, you'll be relying on the shared responsibility matrix and every player who's involved in it to help you get back into operational status.
Yeah, and interesting point. And Zach, when you said, hey, I didn't speak with them, it wasn't that you disliked them. It wasn't that you had any negative bias or anything toward them. You're just like, I've got a lot of work to do. This is what I do, and it has to transcend such a larger vertical right within the organization.
Well, kind of our security guys, we do think a lot about ourselves, right?
Yes.
We think we're top of the line.
Top of the line.
So,
right.
And I also wonder if anything was built in to encourage you to talk.
Not at all.
Or to learn together.
That's interesting.
Because we can look at that as being like, oh, we didn't do that. But did the organization facilitate it? Was that something that was designed in to help encourage shared learning?
It's nowhere there. And that is why I tell people, you got to take your key guys throughout the whole infrastructure and let them have a beer every week. They got to talk to each other. Even if it's just it's not collaboration or anything, they got to know the name and the number and what they do in the organization in order to get that whole thing smooth. Because you're segregating, without you knowing, you're segregating your whole organization from inwards out, and there's no way there's no links of actual open communication between them.
I had one organization, I remember in lockdown, they were really struggling with how do we get these teams to interact with each other, especially now when they weren't in the office, And they did Lego building. They sent out a little Lego pack to everybody individually, got them together on a Zoom or a Teams or whatever, and they all built Lego at home, separate from each other, but together. And it worked.
Simple, reasonable price, build some teamwork. How ironic. We're in the keynote. There's agents doing things automatically. There's going to be, people on Mars, and we're literally just talking back about Legos and pizza and making time to. But it's real, right? Well, we think so higher level, but there's just some base stuff that we've got to get back to. So Zach, on that note, we heard about ResOps. It's trending deep in Twitter, or X, sorry, my God, I used the legacy term. So talk to us about that. I mean, I know it's something we're trending, trying to create, but there's something real under there, right? Because the tools, the interconnection, give it whatever name we want, it still has real pieces underneath that are making ResOps a reality. So maybe from a tools perspective and how we're looking at this resilience operations, give us a feel for what does it really mean at the ground level?
Yeah, it's tricky. So ResOps is, well, you got the tools and the people and the processes, but if you don't test it, I'm just going to come back to that testing thing, Chris.
You got to keep.
If you don't test it, you've got all these tools which you subscribe to for years and years. It's like my membership at a golf range where I went there twice in 2 years, and it ended up spending thousands for those 2 times.
Right.
So you've got all these tools that you pay for and you subscribe to and you buy servers for, and they're running there in the background. If you don't know how to use them, and you get to an incident, and they actually just gonna slow you down in recovering, because frankly those tools are also something that you need to restore once
That's a great point.
it hits the fan, right?
Right, right.
So the tools aren't anything that you, frankly, I'd say to companies, don't even worry about their tools at the moment, because if your people don't know how to act, like if you're in an incident right now, what are you going to do? How do you act? What's the next thing that you're going to do? Now, I understand the optimism thing. It's just for us to kind of get that mindset into a customer. You can't say it's all just roses and cream, right? You gotta say what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Right.
if you keep on being optimistic, they're just going to say, well, then it doesn't sound like we need any of this, do we?
Yeah, and I agree. It's not about denying that the bad thing's going to happen. It's about how you talk about something negative in a way that still can take people with you. So, same when I'm raising awareness of threats. You know, I go and I do awareness raising, I make awareness raising materials, and I'm talking about the bad stuff.
Sure.
I can't raise awareness of cybersecurity and not talk about the threat. But it's doing that in a way that's proportionate, so people don't think you are exaggerating for your own benefit, and then thinking about how you can enable and empower people, even when you're talking about something negative, so they feel that they can still engage with it.
Yeah, and as soon as obviously you're not going to wait for the incident, but as soon as you do like an exercise, a virtual incident exercise, like we've got in recovery range, then you're gonna understand. You're gonna see all these 10 tools, 20 to 100 tools, and you're gonna say, well, we haven't even used any of them in recovering our environment, right? If you get to that point, then you can obviously shed all of those dead skin, and eventually get to a point where you're a lean MVC type of guy that can easily recover. Well, you know what you want to do, and you've trained your people well enough, and you can't go through those exercises without the communication between those teams. And that is one term. So if you don't want to send them for a beer, then at least get them in the room,
Right.
and start with those exercises where you go through the process of things failing in your environment,
Right.
and then ask, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And that's also not a finger pointing exercise.
No.
It's
like a
like
classic
we need
tabletop,
to know.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to get people out of their comfort zone
True,
appropriately,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
And then you got to realize what tabletops are and aren't, right? I mean, tabletop is just one thing that you also to use. You have tabletop exercises, you have rebuild drills, you also have the red team, purple team exercises, right? And they each have a place in an organization. So let's say an organization is mature enough where they're established what their minimal viable company needs to look like, they have all their processes in place, they have the shared responsibility figured out, and they have also understood that, yes, we got to look beyond the human biases. How do you start doing, and what helps you where? So tabletop exercises are essentially low stress exercises. They're not training modules. They're actual half-day, full-day session where you're supposed to come together with that shared responsibility to set people to practice one or more scenarios that your company is most likely to experience, and it helps you build clarity. Red teams are totally different in nature. They're live fires, and red teams essentially help you build humility. So there's a real distinction between what's building clarity, what's building humility.
Oh, I like that.
Right, and then rebuild exercises are essentially the source of truth. It's a reflection where you think about your cyber resiliency maturity assessments, and you say, we have all these plans that we have built based on our assessment. How well does our plans hold water? That's the truth that the rebuild exercises will give you. So all of these have to come together to really give you a real sense of how prepared you are for a real incident.
So you're saying it's easy. Let me write that down.
In a way, it is.
Yeah. Please.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No.
when I started at my company, they hired me to take over the IT cybersecurity. First thing that I did was I took everybody that was in charge in their department. I said, we're going out to lunch. We're not going to have no business talk. We're just going to lunch twice a month.
Okay.
Going to lunch. The other 2 times a month that we have the meeting, talking about business.
Okay.
What could happen, what does happen, who's in charge, who to get in touch with. And I built up communication between all of them so that each department, sort of like what Zach was saying, each person knew, hey, you know, he's not such a bad person, even though he works over there or she works over there.
Right.
Now I know we're a family, we're a company. We each have a stake in, if something goes wrong, we know how to fix it. We trust each other. Whereas I've have worked at companies where the person will say, that's your problem,
Right.
that's not ours. And then the company starts to hit the law, and all the profits go down, the money goes down, and then if it's a cyber hack, the insurance company will come and say, you know, you're not following the procedure, we're going to cut you off.
Yeah.
The way I built it up is sort of, we don't go out for beer because I'm not going to promote drinking.
Right, right.
You know, but if you're going to order beer during the lunch, that's on you.
Sure.
We're going to lunch.
Yep.
Don't talk business. Just learn about each other. And
Keep
I
it
make
at the human level, right?
Right,
Yep.
right.
Yep.
Keep it at the human level, and when we sit down, I tell them, okay, you're from customer service. You're the head of customer service. You sit there. Your second in command is sitting on the right. So everybody, it's somebody different. Now we're all talking, and you get to know each other. The following week when we have the meeting, okay, now we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about, I heard there was a strike, a cyber strike she's saying at the department, I told him, I said it was at Lenox Hill Hospital. What are your thoughts? What is it that they did wrong that can improve us, to help us improve? Because now we're using an outside attack to develop a procedure that we can use to make us stronger. Right. In the 8 months since that's happened, two of my bosses came in and they said, wow, you got everybody here talking to each other now, and they're feeling good about themselves. And I said, it's all, I wish I would have read Jessica's book ahead of time. And I tell them it's all about human communication.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Because they're all communicating with each other now.
Yeah. Did everybody? Did everybody hear that? Yeah. I mean, simple, enforced, and repeatable, right? Because you did it month after month after month, right? I mean,
I still do.
yeah.
And
Oh, fantastic.
I heard a couple of really key things there. One, you used the word trust. Building up trust in those relationships, not just trust in terms of professionals, but trust in terms of people. And then that learning culture of once we've kind of built up some of that trust and we've got to know each other and feel comfortable with each other, then we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about an incident. We're going to talk about what maybe went right, what went wrong, and we're going to reflect on ourselves and what we can do differently. Because you've built up those trusted relationships, people are then going to feel more comfortable to do that. So trust, learning, culture, and really building that wider culture of communication. And I think that's so important then as well. If something goes wrong and you don't know as an individual who to turn to, but you know a few people here and there, you can go and say, hey, this has happened. I'm worried about this. What can we do? And put your heads together. But so much of that comes down to culture and people feeling safe.
You know, I have to give some credit here because what I'm about to say was from a podcast I filmed a little earlier this morning. And the gentleman was the data protection and resilience engineer for Blue Cross Blue Shield South Carolina, Hillman. He's here, he's a great guy. And when we were finishing, I said, hey, is there one thing you'd like to leave everybody with in the podcast? Because he's 25 years in data protection. Like he loves what he does. And he said, you know, even when I started as a kid out of college on the help desk to now, force yourself and put yourself in the middle of a situation. You don't be afraid because you'd be amazed who follows you, right? And I thought that, you know, it's not earth-shattering, but the passion, not afraid to get in the firefight. And then it's amazing who you bring along with you when that happens. And if you have that in addition to what you've done, where they're meeting and get to know each other, the whole thing dovetails on itself and good things happen, right?
I think my only challenge to that, and it comes probably partly back to culture, is it depends on the environment you're doing that within. whether people will follow or whether people will feel comfortable putting themselves within the middle of that environment, or feeling like, as Zark said earlier, are people going to point the finger? Am I going to put my head above the parapet and I am going to become the one who's going to be blamed? And it also potentially raises issues of burnout. If I'm always the one running to fix things, when is that going to start to take its toll?
You need some camaraderie there in the fight, right?
And if you've got the right culture that's going to support you, then I completely agree. But in organizations where there isn't that, relationship building, where there isn't that empathy and trust, and where there isn't that psychological safety of not worrying about getting blamed, I think that's a very different scenario.
It's a great point. Right, it requires multiple layers in the pyramid.
Yeah,
right?
to be negative. I was just talking about the optimism bias.
My God, what happened to the 80%? Remember?
I would add something to it, right? Shared responsibility, which you mentioned, and people. So, we are a decentralized environment right now, and portions of IT, which are held by the corporate team, and individual business unit manage their own environment when it comes to cloud, when it comes to direct services, or things where things overlap. So it is a very, very thin line how much you want to collaborate, how much you want to bring everybody together, and how much you want to separate things out. Because it's a very tricky thing. We are almost like 8 different business units who have their own agendas, own priorities. You're centralized, the corporate environment is one. But again, for the corporate environment, you literally have to take all of them together before you even make one change. And things go down south. Everybody's just, all 8 groups are ready to attack you right there. So it's a very thin line there when it comes to shared responsibility, especially cloud and everything else. Like if you have one tenant, multiple subscriptions in Azure, or one control tower in AWS, and again multiple accounts, and how you separate those things out, right? And it's very tricky actually when it comes to that, and how people respond to.
Well, this is why I mentioned the whole shared responsibility, because that's the crux of where we are faltering as an industry, right? And I think this is why you have so much headwinds of regulations now coming out from DORA in Europe and all the others in the country, because these regulations are forcing the boards to essentially get serious about resiliency and have provable metrics in place to demonstrate that, yes, as an organization, you're doing the right things around keeping data secure and being able to show resiliency when compromises happen. And I think as more and more regulations become more stringent and the penalties become more severe, some of that unwanted but much needed cross-organization pollination and forced collaboration will have to take place. There's no other way around it.
And maybe not to squeeze, not trying to squeeze the AI term in, but if we do look at positives, we have got to free up some time for people to do that. That is the real problem. I mean, I think, right, reading between the lines, not only could it go downhill, but you just have to allocate time across those teams.
Everybody's so busy. At his point, when you say just get out for a lunch, don't talk business, I think it just goes back to the root, right? Just get the people to connect with each other.
Right.
I think that's really a big key to everything else, I would say.
Maybe anything else? I appreciate you both getting the train started. We were going right there, so this is great. Any other questions? Yeah.
On the trust, so we're talking about cyber incidents, right? So there's trust before an incident, then after. So post-incident, if you don't have that trust built up, you're not getting, it's a crime scene, right? They don't know if you internally hacked your own systems. And so the security guys are looking at the backup team and the corporate team. They're individually, subject to interview and audit and whatnot. So you're not going to get trust after that. So what do you do in that case? Preventative for planning this is great. Build that trust with the team, get them to do exercises.
Well, can I see? So what happens when you do these exercises together with the whole team, right? The trust you're building there isn't a trust that can be broken from an incident, because that's what you're actually testing. You're testing for an incident that's going to happen in the future. So with that precursor, then why would, okay, this is just me asking, why would any of the team members suspect someone else in the team if if you do like 2 of these exercises a year, and they get, or no more than that, they all get together and they see the incident happen. You have a virtual thing that you talk about and what has happened and how it's unfolded and what was breached, how it was done, and you work through that through the whole team. Then every one of them actually see the attack from wherever it comes. So when it happens, when it like in reality happens, then I highly doubt that trust is going to be broken because of the actual incident.
But you're building that trust prior.
Yes, yeah.
It's a whole different scene now.
Oh, after, if you haven't built the trust, oh, definitely. Then that's actually a very good point. That's a very good point, that if you haven't, prior to that, built the trust, then it's actually going to be much worse.
Exponential problem.
Because when we were talking about this, I know from one of the companies that I've been in South Africa, there was a whole wing of the company we're talking about 4,500 employees on a site. The whole wing was cut off from any network. And the security guy, I wasn't the security guy then, but he was pointing to the networks guy, and the networks guy was just pointing back. For a few days, that whole wing was off because they keep on arguing whose problem it is. You see, that's network and security, which you would actually think it's quite close knit. Yeah.
So I think it all boils into the culture of the organization, because when you're in trouble and in that kind of situation, instead of finger pointing, it's probably good to think about trying to get a solution, and I think it comes top down. So when the highest levels of management are kind of supporting to get you out of the situation, don't worry where the fault lies, let's get together and think together. And it all boils down to the organization. I've been a part of one of those incidents, and what helped us was senior management backing us, supporting us through this. I mean, it was absolutely network and security, 2 different companies. It was like sister concern in the parent organization. They had a site-to-site tunnel. Any open between the 2 companies, network-wise, we had on the VPN. They needed, the sister concern needed access only on couple applications. Any open. Breach happened from sister concern, came in here, exploited, and it all went out. But whose fault is it? The guys from the network team or the guys who approved the security tunnel, right? So exactly same situation, but again, at that point, the way we looked at it was the CIO said, forget about it, let's get things done. I think goes top down in the culture, back to culture.
And this is the idea of a just culture, and either being restorative or retributive. So when something goes wrong, do you look at what has gone wrong, or do you look at who is to blame? And there's so much, we can look at safety culture in the book Black Box Thinking. If anybody's not read it, highly recommend it. It draws parallels between healthcare and aviation in number of incidents. In healthcare, regret to say, if people don't know, the number of incidents just keep going up. Not in security, just in general. In aviation, the number has kept going down. And they're really looking at why that is, and it comes down to this culture. When an incident happens, are you pointing the finger, or are you trying to get to the root cause?
And I think all of us have been talking about defense in depth for ages, right? And I think now it's the time to shift since we are at shift, to shift our mindset from defense in depth to trust in depth. What I mean by that is, so you're trusting your people to do the right thing, you're trusting your processes to hold up, and you're also trusting the tools and technology at your disposal to act in a way that you have planned for. For example, so you're recovering something, but what if the ransomware attack or the malware attack has actually taken down or compromised your recovery environment, right? So let's say you do not have an air-gap solution, and now your recovery environment is compromised, so you're recovering from an infected environment into prod. So you can't really trust that data, right? And I think this is why we have to look at, great, we have all these defenses, assume breach. And if you're assuming breach, then you're saying I'm going to trust everything implicitly or explicitly, and then I got to build this notion in my head that I want to trust in depth, which means all of my supporting processes should be trustworthy to get me to a trusted state. And then I think that finger pointing and it's you, it's not me, all of that should go away.
Should go away, right. Well, we've got a couple of minutes. I absolutely appreciate everybody singing. I really appreciate the questions. We were like, my God, after all the chicken rolls, are people going to have questions? And there it was. So we couldn't have asked for a better ending. But I want to say an incredible thank you to two groups. First, to Jessica, thank you. Ricky, Zach, I mean, the miles traveled here, unbelievable, right? And I hope you were able to appropriately understand Ricky and I with our accents. I mean, they have the good ones. We Dallas and Phoenix, I mean, come on. But more importantly, I want to thank you. Thank you for taking the time. I know this is a long session, especially right after lunch. And even more importantly, thank you for coming to Shift, being clients at Commvault, and putting your trust in us. We appreciate that a great deal. So have a great rest of your breakouts, and we'll see you out there.
Thanks, everyone.